Newton High's campus forum exploded over one photo. The school tyrant pinned against a wall by the top student, caught in a deep kiss. The usually arrogant bully had red-rimmed eyes and a softened waist, barely able to stand as he clutched the other boy's white collar, looking less like he was being kissed and more like he was begging for more. Good luck to you. May good fortune come your way. The dormitory speakers began playing the morning wake-up bell. A pale, slender hand reached out from behind the half-drawn dark blue bed curtain, its fingertips still marked with tiny, imagination-stirring traces. Then a slightly larger hand reached out after it, caught that pale hand, and pulled it back inside. The movement behind the curtain grew a little louder. If one listened carefully, one could hear broken, intermittent whimpers. Jacob used to be the person I bullied. I wanted to turn him into my obedient little puppy. I never expected him to turn around and bite me instead. In other people's eyes, I was probably the kind of rich playboy who changed girlfriends as casually as changing clothes. My dad had donated a library and an academic building to the school, so no matter how much trouble I caused on campus, the principal could only pretend to be a quail and keep his head down. A lot of people probably envied me, but honestly, my life was miserable. There was no special reason. It was just too boring. Back then, under the influence of my former deskmate, who was a huge BL fangirl, I developed a curiosity about things between two guys. I really couldn't understand it. Could two men doing that sort of thing truly be that happy? As for me, I had always been a man of action. If I wanted to figure something out, I had to take action. It just so happened that after the midterm exams, the teacher rearranged the seating chart and put Jacob next to me. I waited until Henry had moved my desk and chair for me before I leisurely sat down. Then I glanced to my right and froze completely. Because of my family background, I often had to go in and out of high-end clubs. I had seen plenty of good-looking people, but I had never seen anyone as good-looking as the person in front of me. It wasn't until he frowned and glanced at me that I realized I had been staring at him for a long time. Classmate, how about we get to know each other? I straightened my collar and reached out a hand to my new deskmate. However, he acted as if he hadn't heard me at all. He only lowered his head and continued writing something on his desk. Being ignored made me irritated. I kicked the leg of his desk, making a loud bang. I'm talking to you, didn't you hear me? I was extremely unhappy about being ignored. He stood up and walked toward the door. Feeling resentful, I followed him. I'm talking to you, damn it. How could someone be as wooden as this? I followed him all the way to the restroom and felt that he had practically walked into a trap on his own, behind me. Several of my lackeys had already followed after hearing the commotion. As soon as we reached the restroom, I gave Henry a look. Henry understood immediately and went to close the door. Then the group of them rushed forward, ready to teach this pretty boy a lesson. The pretty boy turned around and looked at us with the same expression one might use to look at a swarm of flies. Get him, I ordered. The others surrounded him at once, but what happened next was completely beyond my imagination. I didn't even have time to see what was going on. All I heard were several terrifying, solid thuds of fists hitting flesh. Then all my lackeys were lying on the floor. Jacob stood among the bodies sprawled all over the place, twisting his wrist, his expression dark as he looked at me. I was so frightened I almost didn't dare move. I was terrified he would rush over and snap my wrist, not interested in knowing. You only then did he finally speak. His voice was low, like a demon from hell. I returned to the classroom in a daze. When I saw that he was already sitting back in his original seat, I almost had the urge to turn around and run. But in the end, I still cared about my dignity as the school tyrant, so I elegantly and slowly withdrew from the classroom. For the next few days, I wandered around an internet cafe near the school, mainly because I truly had nowhere else to go. Vacation hadn't started yet. If I went to the racetrack at a time like this, and some acquaintance saw me, then reported it to my dad, I would definitely be in serious trouble. So I might as well stay at the internet cafe. At least there, I didn't have to worry about anything. After staying there from morning until night, I heard my stomach growling. So I scanned the QR code on the table and ordered an ultra deluxe bowl of instant noodles. Then I half reclined in my seat and waited leisurely. Not long after, I heard a knocking sound at the door of the private room. I lazily called out, "Come in." And then I watched helplessly as Jacob walked in. I shot to my feet, my whole body tense. He couldn't be here for revenge, could he? But he hadn't even gotten a scratch on him, and he had beaten all my lackeys to the ground. I hadn't even settled the score with him yet. Forcing myself to stay calm, I asked, What do you want?" "Your instant noodles." He didn't even bother sparing me a glance. His voice was the same as before, so cold it practically shed ice. I froze for a moment, Then I realized he was working part-time at this internet cafe. No wonder he was always absent from evening self-study. HMPHI laughed twice in satisfaction as an idea came to me. So you actually sneak out to work part-time? I'm going to tell the teacher. But he looked completely unconcerned. Jacob shrugged. Mind your own business, puppy. Hey, who are you calling a dog? I flew into a rage. Whoever answers is the dog. Jacob still had that deadpan, expressionless look on his face. I really wanted to scratch up that insufferably arrogant face of his and see whether he could still act this smug afterward. But my wish did not come true. I only dared to think about it, after all. The shadow he had left on me in the restroom that day was far too deep. Fortunately, he didn't do anything else. After delivering the food, he left. I watched the door close. Again, feeling inexplicably disappointed suddenly. All those BL novel scenes my former deskmate had used to open the door to a whole new world for me surfaced in my mind, and at that moment, a wicked idea came to me to carry out my revenge more effectively. I even went to consult my former deskmate during break time. From that day on, I officially granted her the title of my exclusive strategist. What? You like Jacob? You want to pursue him? After hearing what I said, Dora Keller's eyes lit up like a hungry wolf that had just spotted a little lamb. She even leaned forward uncontrollably, her voice trembling with excitement. Tell me your story. Young man, I pressed a hand against her shoulder in disgust and pushed her back into her seat. Why are you more excited than I am? I'm the person involved here. Asterisk, I truly could not understand creatures like BL fangirls. Why did they get more excited over to guys than they did over their own love lives? Anyway, the point is, I like Jacob, but I don't know what to do. Can you help me come up with a plan? I still felt awkward saying it out loud, but the moment I thought of Jacob's annoying face, I decided to throw caution to the wind. Dora screamed. Everyone in the classroom heard the commotion and turned to look at us. Even someone as shameless as me felt embarrassed on her behalf. So I tugged at her sleeve and told her to keep her voice down. I finally get to see a real, living gay guy. Dora dramatically covered her mouth, laughing like a traitor who had sold out his own side. If I hadn't needed her help, I would have been tempted to punch her. At last, when she had laughed enough, I impatiently urged her to get to the point. She leaned close to my ear and whispered a long string of instructions under my doubtful gaze. She patted her chest and shamelessly guaranteed, listen to me. You can't go wrong. I seriously considered whether her suggestions were actually practical. The moment I thought of those cheesy scenes, goosebumps rose all over my body. But for the sake of seeing Jacob look defeated, I decided to give it a try, however. No matter how carefully I planned back then, I failed to consider one possibility. What if Jacob was straight? Seduction? No, wait. The first strategy for pursuing Jacob: increase intimacy and become Jacob's little shadow. Before putting the plan into action, I secretly observed Jacob for quite a while. In the end, I was disappointed to discover that, aside from occasionally going to the restroom between classes and spending the rest of his time holed up in the classroom writing nonstop, who knew what he was writing? Jacob did not behave like those energetic high school boys who ran around like huskies, playing basketball or going to parties. So the scenes I had imagined, like handing Jacob water after a basketball game or taking him home after getting him drunk, could not be carried out at all. How frustrating. Originally, I wanted to stay in the classroom and pretend to accompany Jacob affectionately while he solved problems. However, just as I approached him with a shy expression, before I even touched the corner of his clothes, Jacob noticed. Then, with an expression full of confusion and a faint trace of barely perceptible disdain, he moved slightly to the side. That one movement dealt 1,000 arrows worth of damage to my self-esteem. Some things could be tolerated, but this could not. Smack. With a crisp sound, I slapped my palm onto the desk to express my anger. Jacob finally turned his head to look at me, innocent confusion in his eyes. You need something. This man had finally opened his noble mouth and lowered himself enough to ask me a question. Secretly, I rubbed my hand to ease the pain. While grimacing inwardly, I forced a smile and said, nothing. There was a mosquito here. Jacob stared at me for a while, then he turned back again, his mind diving back into the test paper. I was both furious and helpless. For the whole weeks, I circled around Jacob like a mosquito round an egg, unable to find even the slightest crack to slip through. One day, Henry came to find me and asked, what have you been doing these days? You haven't hung out with us in forever. Ugh. I shook my head and said nothing. At a time like this, how could the word sorrow possibly be enough? Want to go to the internet cafe tonight and play a few rounds? Henry suggested. Smack. I suddenly saw the light and slapped the desk. Again, I had almost forgotten. Jacob worked part-time at the internet cafe. OW. While rubbing my aching hand, I grimaced and said to Henry, "Good brother, how do you want tonight? I'll pay for an all-nighter and let you play as much as you want," full of heroic spirit. I patted Henry on the back and made my solemn promise. When we arrived at the internet cafe, Henry and I booked a private room to play together. But because Henry was there, I couldn't exactly do anything. Halfway through, I simply ordered a bowl of instant noodles. Sure enough, Jacob was the one who brought it over. At that moment, Henry happened to have gone out to use the restroom. Jacob glanced at me, but said nothing. He put down the noodles and was about to leave. I was afraid he would just walk away like that. Wouldn't might a weeks of effort be wasted? Then, in a moment of panic, I quickly grabbed Jacob's wrist just as he was about to pull his hand away. "Hey," I called out, "I have something to say to you." "What is it?" His clear, slightly low voice came from above my head. "Well, I wanted to apologize for what happened before. Could you maybe I got stuck for a moment, not knowing how to continue. "Could I maybe what?" Jacob asked. For some reason, I actually felt that his voice sounded a little attractive. My ears seemed to soften for a second. I must have been going crazy. I shrank my neck back, and before my brain could process the words, they slipped out of my mouth. "Could you maybe stop ignoring me?" Only after I said it did I realize what shameful words had just come out of my mouth. My voice grew quieter and quieter until it was almost inaudible. Click. The door was opened from the outside. Henry had come back from the restroom, as if I had been burned. I hurriedly pulled my hand away from Jacob's wrist. Henry walked, and then froze slightly when he saw Jacob. "What's he doing here?" There was hostility in Henry's tone. "Okay," Jacob suddenly said one word, then, without even looking at Henry, he walked straight out. The conversation felt so disconnected that it took me a moment to realize. He had been answering the request I had just made. He had agreed just like that. I was immersed in shock and ignored Henry's questioning. After that, I went to the internet cafe almost every day. Sometimes, I went with Henry and the others. When that happened, we would book a private room and order instant noodles. But, more often than not, I went alone. I would choose the seat closest to the front counter, right across from Jacob. At first, I tried to find topics to talk about, but after talking for ages, I realized that aside from and O, Jacob never made any other sounds in the end. Just when I was about to explode, he would always time it perfectly and hand me a cup of orange juice he had poured, while making the instant noodles, then carried the noodles off to a private room. I patiently sat across from Jacob for several days. I felt like I was about to weather into a stone statue of a wife waiting for her husband to return. And yet Jacob remained completely unaware of the ardent gazes I threw at him during the gaps between my games. I was terribly depressed. Finally, during a long break between classes, I went to consult my personal strategist. "I think your method doesn't work." With a serious expression, I interlaced my fingers and pressed them against my lips, raising doubts about Dora's strategy. Impossible. Dora looked as if her very dignity had been insulted, and she fiercely defended her honor. "Let me ask you this. What exactly have you been doing at the internet cafe?" "Playing games," I answered. What else was I supposed to do at an internet cafe besides play games? Was I supposed to be like Jacob, that maniac, and do homework? There, Dora gave me a helpless expression that clearly said, "I knew it. You're supposed to be pursuing your future husband." Hello? Dora looked at me as if she hated iron for not becoming steel. "You actually spent your precious time together playing games. I'm starting to doubt whether you really want to pursue Jacob at all." Pursuing my future husband. That phrase struck me like lightning. "Here's what we'll do. Tomorrow is Saturday, and we happen to have the day off. Come to my house. I'll dress you up properly, and then you can go to the internet cafe." With one grand wave of her hand, Dora ignored my protesting gaze and arranged my entire Saturday schedule on her own. On Saturday, I clutched the hem of the skirt tightly and stared at myself in the mirror, feeling uncomfortable all over. Can this really work? At this point, I seriously suspected Dora was less interested in helping me and more interested in satisfying her own twisted sense of fun, because the corners of her mouth were practically stretched all the way to her ears. "Trust me. You look insanely good." Dora held up her phone and started snapping photos of me like crazy. Don't take pictures." I was so embarrassed. I wanted to die. But with Dora's encouragement, I still managed to build up a little confidence. By the afternoon, I was pacing around near the internet cafe, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. The curious looks from passers-by made me feel even more like I had needles stabbing into my back. After circling around once, I finally decided to give up and go home. Just as I was about to turn around, the door of the internet cafe was suddenly pushed open from the inside. Jacob stood in the doorway and asked, "Hey, I noticed you've been standing outside for a long time. Do you need something?" Like a startled cat, every hair on my body practically stood on end. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but my face turned red before the words could come out. "Alex?" Jacob recognized me, a faint trace of surprise appearing in his eyes. "Let's talk inside," in my panic. I pushed Jacob back into the internet cafe. I had planned to sit in my usual spot across from the front counter, but Jacob said he had the day off and would play with me, so we booked a private room for two. The dim lighting of the internet cafe gave me a bit of security. I gathered my courage, adjusted my state of mind, and looked at Jacob with what I thought was a deeply affectionate gaze. "Why aren't you asking me why I'm dressed like this?" Once we entered the room, I became bolder. I deliberately leaned a little closer in Jacob's direction. I saw his Adam's apple bob. I respect everyone's clothing choices. Jacob still looked perfectly composed with that expressionless face of his, but I caught sight of the faint redness at the tips of his ears. If one looked closely, beneath Jacob's unmoving expression, there was a shy awkwardness he didn't quite know how to hide. I grew even bolder. "I wore this for you. Like it?" I practically leaned into Jacob's arms, tilting my head up slightly to look at him as I worked hard to make my gaze even more alluring. At such a close distance, I could smell the faint scent of soap on Jacob. I could also feel the warmth unique to a teenage boy. The lighting was somewhat ambiguous, and Jacob's expression was difficult to read, but I could see it in those dark eyes of his, always as cold and emotionless as a starless winter night. There was now a flustered panic he didn't know what to do with. His long lashes trembled slightly, and a thin flush covered his delicate face. A few strands of his soft, slightly messy hair brushed against my face. Because I had tugged at it, one button of his school uniform collar had come undone, revealing his fair collarbone. We looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. I seemed to hear my own heartbeat go from calm and controlled to completely chaotic. Click. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening rang out, as if he had been abruptly jolted awake. Jacob pushed me away in a panic. Caught off guard, I fell backward, and my lower back hit the edge of the desk. Ignoring the pain, we both looked toward the door at the same time. The door was still properly closed. It had been the sound of the door across from us opening. Jacob's eyes darted around in panic, and his face was as red as a girl's. I felt as though I had discovered a whole new continent. So, Jacob could make this kind of expression too. It was hilarious. Seeing him so flustered actually helped me relax. "I'm going to the restroom," I said. "You can't push too hard. You have to know when to advance and when to pull back." Dora's voice sounded in my ears at just the right time. I hummed a song while washing my hands at the sink, feeling smug about how smoothly the operation was going. Why is such a pretty little thing all alone? Just then, a hoarse, duck-like voice suddenly sounded behind me. I turned around and saw a guy who looked like trouble at first glance standing behind me. His greasy blonde hair, which looked as if it hadn't been washed in days, was combed back. Several shiny earrings hung from his ears, and there was even a skull necklace around his neck somehow. He managed to make an open short-sleeved cardigan and a pair of beach shorts look like the uniform of a street thug, and he actually had the nerve to wink at me as if he were charming. I looked at him warily. I was about to speak, but then I remembered that I was currently dressed like a girl. Speaking rashly would only cause more unnecessary trouble, so I shifted to the side, trying to walk past him. "Hey, don't go. Come play with me, sweetheart." Beach shorts braced one hand against the wall, blocking my way. I glared at him fiercely, warning him with my eyes to move aside. But he had absolutely no sense and remained immersed in his own little world. "Oh my, that look from you just made my bones go soft. Come on, let me buy you a drink." Beach shorts reached out with one pig-like paw, clearly intending to wrap it around my waist. I was just about to lose my temper when Beach shorts suddenly let out a scream. At some point, Jacob had rushed over. He stood behind Beach shorts, one hand clamped around the hand that had tried to touch me, twisting it with terrifying force. His eyes were dark and hostile. Hey, let go. Let go. Help!" Beach shorts screamed. I could almost hear the creaking sound of the bones in his wrist being squeezed together. "Jacob," I quickly called out to him. Only then did he seem to come back to himself and fling Beach shorts' hand away. Beach shorts clutched his injured wrist with one hand and fled in a sorry state. Even while running, he didn't forget to turn back and glare at us viciously. "You'd just wait." Jacob and I walked home together. Jacob's school uniform jacket was draped over my shoulders. His uniform was much bigger than mine, large enough to wrap me up completely, and it still carried the warm heat of his body. We both spoke at the same time, then stopped at the same time. "You go first," I said. I like girls, Jacob said awkwardly. Don't do this because of me. Only bending a straight guy would make the revenge more devastating. It's okay, I said, completely unconcerned. People's feelings can change. Any expression Jacob made other than that deadpan face was just too entertaining. I was practically a wicked collector of Jacob's expressions. I wished I could take pictures of all of them and admire them properly. I'll wait for you forever, I said to Jacob, pretending to be deeply devoted. Watching his face turn even redder, I had to fight hard not to laugh out loud at last. We reached the entrance of my apartment building. I took off his jacket and returned it to him. Jacob still seemed to want to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I slipped into the apartment building like a wisp of smoke. I stood by the window and watched for a while. Jacob looked toward the building twice more before finally leaving. Step 2 of winning Jacob over: pursue relentlessly and flirt boldly. Increase small, everyday gestures of intimacy. Make accidental eye contact. Melt the iceberg with warm little details. I described everything that had happened at the internet cafe to Dora in great detail. Dora's face flushed with excitement. Whenever I got to certain details, she would let out little screams like a cat in spring. Jacob is definitely trying to cover it up. His mouth says he doesn't like you, but his heart is already racing like crazy. Alex, just go for it. I've got your back. I ignored her passionate declaration and immersed myself in the pleasure of seeing my plan succeed. In the days that followed, I brought Jacob a nutritious breakfast every morning, since my dad had bought me an apartment near the school, and there was a housekeeper at home. All I had to do was ask her to make an extra portion. Jacob told me to stop bringing it, but I refused to listen. Rain or shine, I placed breakfast in his drawer on time. Every single day. He couldn't exactly throw it away, but he couldn't give it to someone else either. In the end, he compromised. Warm, thoughtful breakfast delivery acquired. I was simply a little genius at flirting. Accidental eye contact, action for the sake of making eye contact. I went to great lengths. I never imagined there would come a day when I would be reduced to competing with test papers for affection. There was no special reason. Jacob loved studying too much, aside from answering questions in class. He almost never moved his gaze away from his papers at all other times. Those eyes of his eyes that made it seem as though he looked at everyone with deep affection were always glued to his test papers. Got it. Holding my nose, I randomly pulled a test paper out of my drawer, only to see it covered in a sea of bright red crosses. I leaned pitifully close to Jacob's ear. Jacob, could you teach me? Then I saw Jacob's ears turn pink at a speed visible to the naked eye. He turned his face aside, his Adam's apple bobbing as he agreed. Then I happily spread the test paper in front of him and cheerfully leaned closer, pressing against his arm. While Jacob explained the questions, he would sometimes raise his head to look at my reaction. Wanting to make sure I understood, I seized every one of those chances to meet his eyes. Whenever Jacob looked at me, I immediately lifted my head and looked back at him with sparkling eyes. Then I nodded like a puppy to show that I understood. When the teacher had explained the same material before, I had only found it obscure and impossible to understand. But when Jacob explained it, everything suddenly seemed simple and clear. Jacob was seriously amazing. By the end, I was practically looking at him with worship in my eyes, and I didn't notice that his ears had quietly turned red again. This pattern of him tutoring me continued for a while. Then I started thinking about how to increase the number of intimate little gestures between us. One day during the long break, someone came to find Jacob. They seemed to be talking about club matters. Bored out of my mind, I propped my chin in my hand and tilted my head. Watching Jacob's mouth open and close, I found the gentle smile he gave that girl extremely unpleasant to look at. I twirled the pen in my hand while secretly stretching my foot over. I lifted the hem of Jacob's pant leg and lightly rubbed against his ankle. Jacob's brows drew together slightly, and his ankle shifted away. I stubbornly followed after him. Jacob glanced down, then suddenly stood up. The tips of his ears were bright red, but his expression looked terrible, because his movement was too abrupt. The desk and chair made a loud noise. I was startled by him. Jacob lowered his voice and apologized to the girl. Then he gripped my wrist and strode quickly out of the classroom, not stopping until we reached a place where no one else was around. His face was full of anger, and even his voice trembled slightly because he was so furious. I already told you I don't like you. Not understand. Huh? I had never seen Jacob lose his temper before, but right now, I had no room to admire it. Why are you always so self-centered? Can you actually hear anything I say? Can you treat me like a person and respect me? Sometimes, I honestly feel so powerless. Please, stop bothering me. I watched Jacob rage in front of me. Oh, so this was what he looked like when he was truly angry. But I didn't like him. I only wanted to play with him. I just couldn't Stan him. The voice accusing me gradually grew quieter. I could no longer see Jacob's face clearly. Are you crying? Jacob's voice was hesitant. I slapped away the hand Jacob reached toward me and turned around, running off. I ran for a long time. When I finally came back to myself, I realized I was already standing at the school gate. The moment I thought of Jacob, I instantly gave up the idea of going back. I took out my phone and called Henry. I'm in a bad mood, bro. Come out and drink with me. By the time Henry entered the private room, I was already drunk and completely unsteady. Henry, come play with me. Ahaha, in high spirits. I grabbed a liquor bottle and drank straight from it. You should drink less. Henry sounded exactly like an overprotective mom. Although Henry had grown up hanging out with me, it was only today that I suddenly realized he was actually handsome. I stood up and staggered past several of my friends, who were all having the time of their lives. But just as I was about to reach Henry, I tripped over some legs stretched out by some blind idiot. Careful. I fell straight into Henry's arms, dazed and muddle-headed. I braced myself against Henry's chest and stood up. By chance, I noticed that Henry's ears were very red, so I couldn't help reaching out and rubbing them. Why did every single one of them love getting embarrassed so much? Hey, everyone's here. Let's play truth or dare. One of my many worthless drinking buddies made the suggestion, and the others immediately echoed it. Many of them consciously formed a circle and started playing. After only a few rounds, the mouth of the bottle spun with a gurgling sound and pointed at me. Stimulated by alcohol, my brain chose dare. Then I drew a card. Written on it was, call the person you most recently fought with. I narrowed my eyes and stared at it for a long while, before I finally understood what those words meant. Most recently fought with Jacob. That name appeared in my mind at once, I swear. I was so drunk at the time that my brain couldn't turn properly, otherwise I absolutely would never have actually done it. But unfortunately, there was no otherwise in the world. The phone rang 3 times before the other side picked up. I swallowed and opened my mouth, but the words that came out were still slurred. Jacob, can we not fight anymore? The person on the other end seemed to say something, but I didn't hear it clearly. It was all because the background music and the cheering around me were too loud. Huh? I responded loudly. Where are you? This time, I finally heard him clearly. I frowned and looked at my phone, feeling completely baffled. Where I am. What does that have to do with? It took me forever to get one sentence out, and I still couldn't say it properly. Dark Night Bar. Someone with a quick mouth shouted loudly, wait for me. Jacob hung up decisively. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Someone actually dared to hang up on me. I was lost in the fog of drunkenness and my dissatisfaction over Jacob daring to hang up on me without permission. I did not notice at all that everyone around me looked as if they were waiting to watch a good show. When Jacob pushed the door open and walked in, I had one arm hooked around Henry's shoulders and was forcing him to drink. Okay, I'll drink. Be careful, don't fall. Henry took the drink from me with a helpless expression, but he only set it aside. Why aren't you drinking? I asked, my tongue heavy. I still have to take care of you and get you home later. Why did Henry's voice sound so gentle, so nice to listen to? Happily, I hooked my arm around Henry's neck and rubbed my face against his. Jacob walked over with a dark expression, grabbed me in one motion, and pulled me into his arms. Hey, who is this guy? Someone shouted in confusion. Henry grabbed Jacob's shoulder. Hey, I'm still standing right here. Where do you think you're taking Alex? I'm taking him home. He's drunk, Jacob said in a low voice. Don't be mad, don't fight. Through my blurred vision, I saw Jacob's face right in front of me. It felt like a dream, so I reached out and touched it. Warm. Do I look dead to you? Henry said sarcastically. Since when has taking someone home required Jacob to come over personally? I want Jacob. Although I couldn't really hear what they were saying, I was still thinking about Jacob getting angry earlier that day. Fine, Alex. You've got nerve. Henry was so angry he almost laughed. He turned around, sat back down, and took a gloomy swig of alcohol. Jacob supported me as we walked out of the bar. The cool breeze outside brushed against my face, far better than the stale, murky air in the private room. I broke free from Jacob's support and staggered forward a couple of steps. Then I pointed one finger at the sky and shouted, I'm the king of the world. Jacob pressed a hand to his forehead, then helplessly crouched down in front of me. Get on. I'll carry you. I stared at the broad, solid back in front of me for a moment, then happily launched myself onto it. Yay, Jacob caught me steadily with his back and stood up. Car, when I saw a taxi speeding past on the side of the road, I actually managed to calmly wonder why Jacob wasn't calling one. But that question was clearly decomplicated before long. I gave up thinking because my head was spinning. The back beneath me was broad and steady. I wrapped my arms around Jacob's neck, and as he walked, the gentle rise and fall of his steps made me so comfortable I almost fell asleep. Jacob, I didn't mean to disrespect you, I don't know how to make you like me. All of a sudden, I felt a little wronged. I just wanted you to stop ignoring me all the time. You never smile at me. I won't be like that anymore. I've never liked anyone before. I don't know. My throat felt blocked and my eyes stung. Don't be mad. My voice was already tinged with tears, not wanting anyone to see me cry. I buried my face against Jacob's shoulder and rubbed against it. Jacob turned his head. Alex, look at me. His voice was so gentle. I lifted my head in a daze and saw Jacob turning to look at me. His gaze was gentle too, a Jacob I had never seen before. I'm sorry. The boy's voice was filled with sincerity. The dim yellow street light fell over the top of his head. His crow feather-like lashes were distinct beneath the light as if dusted with gold. His amber eyes looked at me seriously, as though I were the only person left in the world. I stared for a while, then, as if possessed, leaned forward and kissed those beautifully shaped lips. I felt Jacob's body stiffen. You really don't like me after all. I pushed his face away, so aggrieved that another sob slipped out. Jacob sighed, set me down, and placed both hands on my shoulders to steady me. I lost my temper today because I panicked. I couldn't understand myself. I never once imagined that I would like a boy. Jacob suddenly spoke to me very solemnly, though I had no idea what he was saying. The alcohol was still working through me. I stared at Jacob's face in confusion, trying hard to understand every word, afraid that I was only flattering myself and had misunderstood. This is very hard for me to accept because of it. The plans I made for the first 17 years of my life suddenly feel like they've all become useless. Hearing this, I let out a huff and tried to break free from his hands, but Jacob gripped my shoulders even more firmly. I wanted to reject you. I wanted to get rid of you. I wanted everything to go back to normal. But when I saw you and Henry holding each other so closely, I couldn't stand it. I stopped struggling. I was almost stunned as I listened because I want you to be part of my future. Because I've fallen for you. Alex, I froze completely this time. Jacob was the one who leaned down and kissed me again. His lips brushed lightly against mine, testing, then prying mine open. His tongue slipped in, gentle yet domineering in a way that allowed no resistance, of course. I never even thought of resisting. My brain had already stopped working. All my attention was focused on our tangled lips and teeth. We stood on the empty street and kissed, both of our hearts trembling under the rush of hormones. It felt like a dream I prayed I would never wake from. The next day, when I woke up, my head felt like it was splitting open. I looked around and realized I was in my own bed. I had even been changed into clean pajamas. Since when had Henry become this considerate? Full of confusion, I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. But when I suddenly saw my reflection in the mirror, I was so startled I nearly screamed. The person in front of me had red, swollen lips, as if they had been thoroughly ravaged by someone. Oh my God, what the hell had Henry done? I patted my own face, then bent down to brush my teeth while staring at myself in the mirror in shock and suspicion. The moment I bent down, a flash of red swept across my line of sight. I tugged at my pajama collar and saw, slightly below my collarbone, an obvious, bright red hickey. A hickey. My brain crashed. I was a complete mess in the wind. Was this something Henry could do? What exactly had I gone through last night? Why couldn't I remember anything? Ugh. I still remembered the grudge from yesterday, when Jacob had scolded me so harshly. So, when I felt his gaze fall on me the moment I entered the classroom, I lifted my chin proudly. Without even looking at him, I walked straight ahead and sat down in my seat. That gaze remained intense. Unable to bear it any longer, I turned my head and glared fiercely at Jacob. What are you looking at? I snapped. You don't remember what happened last night? Jacob asked. My expression went blank for a split second. Forget it, Jacob sighed. What happened last night? What about last night? I tried hard to think for a long time. But reality told me that some things could not be achieved through effort. Alone, forget it. I wouldn't think about it anymore. And so, I unilaterally began giving Jacob the cold shoulder. Baby, that's not how you solve this problem. You won't get the answer that way. He was standing way too close. What does that have to do with you? I angrily slammed my pen down. Baby, are you not bringing me breakfast anymore? He looked as if he were about to cry. What does that have to do with me? Pretty boy. Living off my kindness, baby. Can you stop being mad at me? What was with this baby thing anyway? My ears were pregnant, Mom. This man was using his voice to forcibly kiss my ears. Dora seemed to sense the subtle awkwardness between Jacob and me. What exactly is going on between you and Jacob? Finally, one day, she couldn't hold back anymore and came to ask me. I told Dora everything from beginning to end, of course. I skipped over the hickey. A young master like me still needed his dignity. Dora pondered for a moment, then she slapped the desk and stood up. Bingo. Burn. Dora grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard, her voice trembling with excitement. Jacob likes you. Once again. I seriously questioned whether Dora's 10 years of BL novel experience was actually real. How did you come to such a wildly far-reaching conclusion? I was almost dizzy from being shaken. Baby, have you ever heard a famous saying? Dora suddenly put on a mysterious, profound expression. What famous saying? I asked. When someone is afraid of falling for another person, it means they've already fallen for them. Our classmate Dora had really discovered the truth through her extraordinary powers of deduction. Get out of here. I thought that was complete nonsense. It's true, 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 true. Dora began shaking my shoulders again. Fine, you win. If she kept shaking me, I was going to throw up next. Just do exactly what I say. I guarantee Jacob will be hopelessly devoted to you. Dora looked thrilled. As long as you don't get me killed, I said, still wearing a deeply distrustful expression. When the other person refuses to admit their feelings because they're being stubborn and proud, the best method is to leave them hanging. Play hard to get, keep your distance. Well, I didn't want anything to do with him right now anyway, HMPH. It just so happened that Henry had been coming to hang out with me a lot these days, and I welcomed him very much. That way, I could perfectly and justifiably block Jacob's inexplicable attempts to get closer to me. It would have been even better if I could ignore the worried look in Jacob's eyes. Seriously, what is going on with you? I finally exploded that day when Jacob took you home. He didn't do anything to you, did he? Meow, meow, meow. Weren't you the one who took me home? Henry looked as if he wanted to slap himself, regretting his words at once. You forgot. If I'd known, I wouldn't have said anything. Henry was such a dog. Hurry up and confess. What exactly happened? I pounced on him and hooked an arm around Henry's neck. I don't know. I forgot to. Henry, that stubborn duck, really did have a hard mouth. Tell me, Henry, please. Ever since we were little, Henry had always fallen for this trick. As long as I acted cute, his ears would soften and he would compromise. What? Do you have asthma? My patience had run out. There was no need to keep enduring. I turned my head and glared angrily at Jacob. Jacob shrugged innocently. During PE class, the teacher made us do a long-distance run. 1,000 meters, my nightmare. I planned to slip away without anyone noticing, but unexpectedly, Jacob, who was standing beside me, grabbed the soft flesh at the back of my neck. Ugh, no. Don't. I'll run with you, okay, baby. My ears were violated again. Sob. In the end, I still ran the 1,000 meters. After one lap round the track, I was already running as slowly as humanly possible. Calling it turtle speed would have offended turtles. It was an insult to the entire turtle kingdom. A metallic taste rose in my throat, as if I had swallowed a handful of gravel. For the last lap and a half, I basically finished only because Jacob was supporting me. By the time we reached the finish line, I was almost about to collapse to the ground, but Jacob had an arm around my waist, helping me catch my breath. So, I hung off him like a human pendant. Only after resting for quite a while did my legs regain a little strength. With Jacob supporting me, I walked toward the water dispenser. Don't think I'm grateful to you. My unyielding spirit perked up again. Since I was little, no one has ever dared to treat me like that. I was still brooding over Jacob's outburst from that day. I don't want to forgive you at all. Absolutely not. Even Henry is better than you. Those words seemed to trigger some kind of switch. Jacob suddenly went crazy. He took several quick steps and brought me to a corner beneath the bleachers. Because I had just finished running, my limbs were still weak and powerless. I could only be led along by him. Then Jacob's handsome face, perfect from every angle, enlarged infinitely in front of me. What are you? Before I could finish the sentence, it was blocked. This was a kiss with a beastly edge. Jacob bit and nipped at my lips. You really don't like me after all. He pried my teeth apart forcefully, hooked my tongue, and tangled with it. I never once imagined that I would like a boy. A rush of pleasure shot up from my tailbone, and half my waist went weak. When I saw you and Henry holding each other so closely, I couldn't stand it. I grabbed Jacob's collar to keep myself from sliding down, deepening the kiss at the same time. Because I've fallen for you, Alex. Jacob withdrew from my mouth and gently nipped at my chin. Don't say things like that, okay? He took my hand and pressed it against the left side of his chest. It hurts here, I remembered. I remembered what he had said that night. I yanked hard on his collar and kissed him again. Click. Suddenly, a loud camera shutter sound came from nearby. My heart jolted. Jacob and I both turned toward the source of the sound. All we saw was a flash of yellow darting quickly through the bushes outside the track. Jacob let go of me and ran to the fence to check, but because of the wire fence, he could only stop there. It was that blonde guy from the internet cafe. Jacob said when he ran back. Newton High was considered one of the best key high schools in the province. Because of that, the school was extremely strict about students' academics, especially for seniors, who had to struggle every day in an endless sea of exam questions and wander through mountains of homework. Their daily lives were simply home and school, and home, dull, boring, and exhausting enough to drain the light from anyone's eyes. The only soothing comfort for these poor senior year creatures was the gossip on the campus forum. So, you can imagine how explosive the reaction was when an anonymous account uploaded that kissing photo of Jacob and me to the forum. Comparing it to a drop of water falling into a pan of hot oil would not be an exaggeration. However, the photo did not circulate for long. Very quickly, the forum administrator forcibly deleted the post from the back end. Even so, the aftershock of the photo remained. Whenever I walked around campus, I could feel countless gazes landing on me, like needles, stabbing into my back. What happened afterward was honestly far too boring. Teacher talks, parents called in, written reflection, the whole package, and after that, I had to face my father's fury. He took me back to the family estate and made me kneel for an entire day and night. How ridiculous if you added up all the time he had spent with me since the day I was born. It would barely amount to a full week. What right did he have to control me? He had so many illegitimate children out there already. Did he really need me to carry on the family line from beginning to end? I watched my father's useless rage with cold eyes. It wasn't until he planned to shift his anger onto Jacob that I finally couldn't bear it anymore. If you dare do anything to Jacob, I'll post everything online. The son of Ford Corp's chairman is fooling around with another guy. You don't want to see a headline like that trending, do you? Since his rage was only because he had lost face, then he could also calm down for the sake of saving face. You. Get out of here. The old man finally gave in, so I got out, completely indifferent. After a round of chaos, everything seemed to return to normal. The heat on the forum had already been suppressed. Because the school wanted to protect its reputation, it did not take any further action. My dad had completely given up on trying to control me. My classmates stayed lively for a few days, but soon, they were once again crushed by the ever-increasing amount of homework and sighing in despair. The wind passed without leaving a trace. Even the two people at the center of the gossip, Jacob and me, were not separated as deskmates. Everything felt hazy, almost like a dream. But I knew the warmth constantly coming from Jacob's hand tightly holding mine under the desk was real. That day, Henry came running over, furious. I have something to say to you. Confused, I followed him to the restroom. At that moment, all the students had gone to the field for morning exercises, so there was no one inside. Let me ask you this, do you really like Jacob? Henry's eyes were somewhat dark, mixed with emotions I couldn't understand. He gripped my wrist tightly. It hurt. Like someone whose tail had been stepped on. I stammered for a long time, without being able to say anything. I remembered my original reason for approaching Jacob, and my heart began to waver. I had deliberately gotten close to Jacob because I wanted revenge, but I had never thought about why. From the very beginning, I chose this method to get revenge. Did I really like him? I didn't know. You don't like him, right? Henry leaned closer, guiding me step by step. Of course. My pride would not allow me to admit in front of Henry that I liked Jacob. Once the first words came out, the rest became less difficult. In order to excuse myself as quickly as possible, I began speaking without thinking. I was just playing around. That pretty boy hit my guys before. Remember? You got punched back then too. After dating him for a while, I'll dump him. But actually, I did not want to be separated from Jacob. I liked being with him. You'd better be telling the truth. Only then did Henry's anger ease. He pinched the soft flesh at the back of my neck and threatened me. Click. The door of one of the restroom stalls suddenly opened from the inside. Jacob walked out, his face pale. Jacob. I was startled, and I suddenly remembered what I had just said. Had he heard everything? But Jacob walked straight past me without even glancing at me. When he passed by, I saw the muscle near the back of his jaw move slightly. I wanted to chase after him, but the icy look in his eyes made me tremble. Then I suddenly thought of something and turned back. You did that on purpose? My voice was shaking. Yes, Henry pressed his tongue against the inside of his cheek. Why, my heart froze. Because I like you, Alex. Henry suddenly leaned toward me, looking as if he was about to kiss me. This is how you like me. I shoved Henry away hard. My heart felt as if it had been smashed with a heavy blow, reduced to a pile of useless debris. And to think I treated you as my best friend with red eyes. I stared deeply at Henry one last time, then turned and left. From that day on, everything seemed to return to the starting point. Jacob went back to his expressionless era. On the rankings, the name that had held first place for years was still dazzling. Although my dad no longer cared about me, at least he hadn't really cut me off. He still remembered to send me some living expenses every month, though I suspected that was probably his assistant's doing, and so I returned to being a second-generation rich kid with a bit of money to spend. The only difference was that Jacob took the initiative to talk to the teacher and requested that we no longer sit together. Thinking about it now, it was honestly funny. Even the rumors had not separated us in the end. We collapsed from within. I didn't understand why my heart often felt as if there were a hole in it. Cold wind kept pouring in. I was lost and helpless. I didn't know where the switch was. Later, I went away for intensive art training. Did I never tell you? Actually, I was on the specialty student track. The training was completely closed off, and life there was very simple. Every day, I slept, painted, and attended academic classes. The cold wind had probably drained all my energy. I couldn't even summon the will to cause trouble. During that period, I actually studied steadily for a while. After that came the college entrance exam. I was never cut out for studying anyway. After finishing the exam, I only felt that I had no regrets. I had filled in everything I knew. As for the ones I didn't know, there was nothing I could do about them outside the exam site. Crowds of parents lined both sides of the road, welcoming their precious children, the future. What a confusing word. Because I want you to be part of my future, liar. All of a sudden, I really wanted a cigarette. On the night after the college entrance exam ended, our entire class held a graduation banquet at a hotel. Once the exam was over, the heavy burden on everyone's shoulders disappeared all at once. There was no longer any need to care about the restrictions of school discipline. The girls all put on their most beautiful dresses, did their most delicate makeup, gathered in little groups, laughed and talked, and secretly cast glances at the boys they liked. The boys began imitating adults, exchanging toasts at the tables, only their every gesture still carried an undeniable childishness. I leaned against a sofa at the side, finally getting my wish as I held a cigarette between my fingers. Through the curling smoke, I watched people come and go before my eyes. Dora walked over with a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a delicate, pink, fluffy dress, and her two curled twin ponytails obediently fell over her chest. Okay? What is going on with you? You look like a widow. Her choice of words was still as precise as ever. I don't know, really. I didn't know whether I liked him or not. I didn't know why my heart still felt like it had wind leaking through it. I didn't know why there were so many drawings of him in my sketchbook, drawn without me even realizing it. I didn't know. Hey, don't cry. Dora put her glass down on the table and hurried over to sit beside me. She pulled out several tissues and wiped my tears from me. Why was I crying again? How embarrassing. How could you not know? Dora said softly. You already know the answer, don't you? You still want to be with him, right? Do I? It felt as if the howling cold wind had softened a little, but he definitely hates me now. My tears started spilling out again. How will you know if you don't try? Dora rubbed my head the way one might comfort a puppy. I nodded hard, not far away. Jacob had a gentle smile on his face as he talked with the classmates surrounding him. Even without looking at his grades, I knew he must have done well. Again, he always did. Everyone was eager to get close to him. I hesitated for a long time at the edge of the crowd, wandering around uncertainly, then retreated again. Go already. Once you explain things clearly, it'll be fine, Dora said, anxiously worrying on my behalf. No, I'm nervous. I need a drink first to calm down. I made up an excuse with perfect righteousness. Jacob, I have something to tell you, hic. By the time I actually walked up to Jacob, I reeked of alcohol. I was hiccuping drunkenly, and even my words came out slurred. I swayed as I led him to a corner hidden by potted plants. Only then did I narrow my eyes and look seriously at the person in front of me. After several months apart, Jacob seemed to have grown a little taller, but he also looked thinner. He was wearing a white shirt. The lines of muscle beneath the fabric were faintly visible. The buttons were fastened all the way to the top, neat and proper. giving him a restrained, almost ascetic kind of allure. Under the warm globe-shaped light, his lashes were like golden moths resting on his face. The lines of his lips were still so beautiful that they made me want to taste whether they were the same as before. I took a step forward and placed both hands on Jacob's collarbones, then I stood on tiptoe, searching for his lips. Jacob tilted his head slightly away, leaving only his clean, sharp jawline facing me. Grievance surged into my heart, sour enough to make it clench. Do you not like me anymore? My nose stung, and my tears disobediently fell on their own. You're still trying to use this trick. Jacob let out a cold scoff and brushed my hands off him. I admit that before. I only wanted to mess with you, but later, I couldn't really tell anymore. I didn't know. Without you by my side, during training, I kept thinking about you. I drew so many pictures of you. But every time I thought about you hating me, I wanted to cry. The more anxious I became, the more incoherent my words grew. In my panic, I desperately wanted to find something to anchor myself to. So I hurriedly tried to find Jacob's lips again. This time, he did not dodge. I pressed against his lips and rubbed against them awkwardly, a little stunned, unsure how to proceed. But Jacob only lowered his eyes and looked at me calmly, not taking the initiative. Ugh. Jerk, when it had just been the two of us before. He had always been so fierce he nearly kissed my mouth raw. Now he was pretending to be reserved, indignant. I recalled how Jacob had kissed me before, then wrapped my arms tightly around his neck. My tongue tentatively reached out. His teeth were not clenched. I pried them open, licked his teeth, then slipped inside and touched another wet, hot tongue. I pressed closer, coaxing his tongue out, then lightly sucked on it. A hand suddenly tightened, hard around my waist. I let out a soft hum and lifted my head to look at him. Desire churned in his eyes, as if he wanted to swallow me whole. Just as Jacob was about to lean in and kiss me again, I reached out a finger, slipped it into his mouth, and hooked his tongue. Do you still hate me? I was still fixated on that question. I never hated you. I was only angry at myself. Jacob's voice was low and hoarse. I love you too. Good luck to you. May good fortune come your way. The dormitory speakers began playing the morning wake-up bell. A pale, slender hand reached out from behind the half-drawn dark blue bed curtain, its fingertips still marked with tiny traces that stirred the imagination. Then a slightly larger hand reached out after it, caught that pale hand and pulled it back inside. The movement behind the bed curtain grew a little louder. If one listened carefully, one could hear broken, intermittent whimpers. Jacob's first impression of Alex was that he was insane. He had kicked Jacob's desk for no reason. After that, who knew what had gotten into him? Every day, he ran to the internet cafe, then stared at Jacob. Although Alex said he liked him and claimed he had worn the skirt for him, Jacob could sense the teasing, playful attitude behind it, so he did not take it seriously. He even told Alex openly and honestly that he liked girls, even though, in truth, Jacob did not actually know what his sexual orientation was. In the past 17 years of his life, Jacob had never had feelings for anyone, whether boy or girl. So he had naturally assumed he liked girls. But later, when Alex circled around him every day with those bright, sparkling eyes, Jacob unexpectedly felt that it was not so bad. Gradually, without knowing exactly when it started, Jacob would find himself staring at Alex whenever Alex fell asleep on the desk. Then, after coming back to his senses, he would feel annoyed and silently condemn himself. That day, while Jacob was talking to a club member, Alex had secretly rubbed against his ankle under the desk. At first, Jacob only felt that something was there, but he did not pay it much attention later. When he lowered his head and saw that it was Alex, a sudden rush of heat surged downward through his body. He panicked. He was angry. Why did Alex have to cling to him like this? With Alex's conditions, all he had to do was crook a finger, and plenty of people would rush toward him one after another. Why? Why was Jacob losing control? Because he was panicking. And why was he panicking? Because it seemed like he had fallen for Alex. After thinking it through for a long time, Jacob was startled by the conclusion he had reached. Alex had cried. That thought suddenly surfaced in his mind like a bubble rising from underwater. Jacob remembered Alex's pitiful appearance at that time, his eyes red, and something seemed to strike the softest part of his heart. I like him. Jacob became even more certain of that thought. Then Alex's phone call came. When Jacob entered the bar and saw the drunk Alex hanging bonelessly off another boy, anger rushed through him. He carried Alex on his back for a stretch of road, then they kissed. Alex's tearful voice made Jacob's heart ache, even drunk. He couldn't possibly act that convincingly, could he? He really likes me, Jacob thought. So Jacob confessed. Feelings began before one knew why. Jacob could not remember when it had started, he only knew that At some point, he had begun secretly looking at Alex when Alex wasn't paying attention. He had begun feeling jealous when Alex was close to someone else, but none of that mattered anymore, because now, Alex could only be his.